kindly mute their mics. There appears to be a provision here to do that. So, well, it does not seem to work. But anyway, I presume that I am audible and clearly visible. My apologies, of course, for not coming in person there. But that is what the pandemic days do to all of us. When I was requested to speak as chief guest on this occasion, I was wondering what to say. You know that I'm a teacher, but many of you don't know that I'm actually a storytelling teacher. So what I have done is I have picked up 5 stories, actually 6 stories. The 6th one is less of a story, but more of a description of the efforts which are ongoing for applying science and technology to solve problems this year. Each of these stories is actually an anecdote which happened in my life and which taught me something. I just hope that these personal experiences could also be found illustrative to all of you, and you might perhaps take something from each of these. I'm sure many such incidences would have happened in your own lives. We often tend to forget them, but I think it is important to remember the lessons that we learn from these. The 6 stories that I'm going to talk about actually reflect different themes. So let me first list out the themes to which these anecdotes relate. The first one is about bringing out the best in you without bothering too much about the ongoing rat race. The second is the fiduciary discipline that we all must follow when we deal with public money of any kind. The third is how to maintain our composure and display a sense of humor even in adverse circumstances. The fourth is about personal ethics that each one of us must follow. The fifth is about the aspirations of our youth, which are evident in multiple facets, but one which I learned myself through an anecdote. And the sixth is about the multidisciplinary approach needed in this digital century to solve any problem. Applying science is typically important, but that alone is not adequate. I'll try and illustrate that with my last story. So I seek your indulgence to listen to these stories. Let me begin by the first one on why we must try and bring out the best in ourselves. This is an incident which happened in the city of Raipur. We were transferred from the city of Jagdalpur to Raipur. I was in 8th grade then, was to go to 9th grade next year. Halfway through, we were transferred. In the new school in Raipur, there were quarterly or half-yearly tests or something which I appeared. And in the mathematics paper, I scored 96 marks and stood first in the class. I was very happy. In spite of being transferred from another city, I had done well. So I came back very happily with the answer book. Gave that answer book to my mother and I said, I scored 96 marks. She also started smiling, took out the answer book, started flipping through the pages. I was looking at her smiling all the way. And then she suddenly asked me, Deepak, where did you lose 4 marks? I was actually taken aback. I mean, I had scored 96 marks. So inadvertently, I blurted out, I stood first in the class. Suddenly, the smile disappeared from her face. It became very stern. And guess what? She slapped me hard. I was very upset. I must be the first joker to be slapped after scoring 96 marks in an exam. Started crying and I said, why? And she said, did I ask you what was your position in the class? You had scored 96 marks out of 100. I only asked you, where did you lose 4 marks? Had you scored only 40 marks and stood last in the class, I would still not have asked you where you stood with respect to others. I would have asked you, where did you lose those 60 marks? I was upset actually, but later on in the night when I reflected, I realized that what she was telling me is that being competitive and doing better than others is perhaps important. That is part of the rat race that we participate in our lives. But far more important is to do introspection and figure out whether you could have done something better, whether you had exercised all your abilities to do something or not. That was a great lesson which has stayed with me. My dear friends, after doing any activity even today, I do introspect. I do not compare myself with how others have done it or how others would do it. I only check whether I have done my best and whether I have made any mistakes. And believe me, when I ask myself the question, could I do it better? The answer is always yes. That is the advantage of introspection. Surely we have to continue to participate in rat race. We have to we have to do better than others in competitive exams and so on. That is part of life. But it should not take away from us the great opportunity to do introspection after every activity that we do. That is where I believe we learn the best. And that is why I have termed this incident as an incident which taught me how to bring out the best in you. The second anecdote happened in my life, which taught me about the fiduciary discipline by dealing with public money. This happened in early 70s. In those days, I used to participate in competitive chess. The city of Mumbai used to hold annual tournaments in a club in Matunga, and I was participating in that tournament. There was a player, one Mr. Abdul Jabbar. He came from very humble background, from a Julaha community, was not very well educated. He used to wear canvas shoes without socks, I still remember. He had probably studied up to 5th grade or something. It was very interesting when the rules of chess tournaments desired that everybody must write the moves. Pawn, king 4, knight to king, bishop 3, etc., etc., etc. We all could do that, of course. Jabbar actually learned to write P for pawn, K for king, etc. I don't think he ever learned the full English alphabet, but he could record the moves as required. The point is not that. Irrespective of not knowing English, irrespective of coming from a very humble background, on the chessboard, he had absolutely amazing prowess. He was not only Maharashtra champion, he was National B champion, and he was the champion of the fastest chess playing tournament that used to be held in the country. In fact, it was a privilege to play in the same tournament. In the Swiss League, as you know, one of the rounds I had to face him. And I was not a bad player, by the way, but when I started playing, in about 5 or 6 moves, he took me completely out of the book. So whatever I had studied was useless. And he actually made a mincemeat of me in about 20 or 25 moves. Anyway, when we walked out of that tournament hall and we started walking, there were some other people also with us. One of them was Mr. Sakharkar, the then secretary of Maharashtra Chess Association. So Abdul Jabbar turned to Sakharkar and said, "Sir, which bus goes to Jhandu Pharmaceuticals in Parel?" Those of you who would not know this, Jhandu Pharmaceuticals used to be a company established in Parel. They had a canteen which they had given to Bombay Chess Association youth in the evenings. So Bombay Chess Association used to have an office there. And in fact, many tournaments used to be held there also. So Sakharkar asked him, "Why do you have to go there?" So he says, "Nahi sahab, wo Vidarbha Association ke kuch papers dena hai. I have to give some papers from Vidarbha Chess Association. I have to collect something." Then Sakharkar says, "Oh, you are going for association's work. Then why don't you take a taxi and go?" And this simple man said, "Sir, मैं अपने काम के लिए कभी टैक्सी में नहीं बैठता. Association का पैसा कैसे खर्च करूं?" Meaning that for my own work, I never spend money on a taxi. How can I spend association's money to travel? So Sakharkar told him the bus number, he went there. The point is, how many of us, and I have seen large number of educated people who would travel first class or business class just because government is paying them money, but they are not willing or able to spend money for doing the same thing. I reflected. I used to be called, for giving keynote addresses, attending conferences, etc., etc. And I used to be hosted by people. And I said, I get hosted by people. People spend money on me. But do I intend to, and am I willing to spend money on my own for doing exactly the same thing that my hosts do? So that year I decided that every year I will undertake a trip at my own cost. I'll spend my own money for the entire trip. I picked up a conference, a CSI annual conference. I did that next year also. The idea was that when I come back and reflect, if it does not pinch me to have spent money from my own pocket, then and only then I'm entitled to be hosted by others. A curious thing happened actually in the second year. My wife Pratibha, who used to keep tab of accounts, she found out that in the second successive year, there was no reimbursement claim made by me. And she says, "Deepak, what is this? You have traveled twice, but there is no reimbursement." Then I sheepishly told her about this learning from Abdul Jabbar. And I said, "Look, Pratibha, I call these Jabbar trips." So she smiled and said, "Deepak, you are doing these ethical experiments and ethical learning at my cost. That is not fair. So promise me one thing. Every year when you do that, you will also take me along. So you and I both must be willing to spend money." Since then, my dear friends, every year without fail, and this has been happening for well, almost 50 years now. Every year, we travel business class, go to a conference or someplace, we stay in five-star hotels. And when we come back and reflect and we say, this is okay, then and only then we feel justified in our host spending their public money on hosting me. The point I'm making is that when public money is being spent, I should be at least as careful in its expenditure as I am while spending my own money. This is a very fundamental fiduciary discipline, my dear friend. In fact, you need to be more watertight. You need to respect all the rules and obligations. Since there are so many students, let me tell you my experience. Many students very enthusiastically conduct such events. They spend fairly good amount of money, which is collected through either donations or contributions by colleges, etc. But many times the students forget to do the due diligence of submitting the bills appropriately, of signing on all the papers, of keeping all the bookwork proper. That is incorrect. It is public money that we are spending, and therefore it is our fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the entire discipline is maintained in spending public money. That is what I learned, and that is what I hope all of you should have this as a takeaway for your own activities in law. The third anecdote I wish to share with you deals with a human aspect. You know, there are occasions when we are irritated, something is not happening correctly, somebody is misbehaving, and we tend to lose our temper. How do you maintain your composure and your sense of humor even in such trying circumstances is very, very important. Of course, I have learned it from many instances and I have practiced it. But this story I'm going to relate to is a very interesting story. It happened, I was attending a conference in Malaysia, and when I was returning, I was to attend another conference in Mumbai arranged by my friend Samir Kochar. The Scotch Foundation used to have the annual financial summit. It was to be held in Bandra Lansdowne. And as I landed in Mumbai, he called me and he said, "Sir, have you returned from Malaysia?" I said, "Yes, I'm going home." So he says, "But Mrs. Phatak is not at home." So I said, "Yes, I know, but I'll come tomorrow morning and attend the conference." He said, "No. Why don't you come to the hotel? I have booked a room for you here." I said, "All right." It was pretty late. Actually, around 10:30 in the night, I went to the hotel, took the key from the person. It was some kind of a smart card key or whatever, and went to my room. My room number was actually 1023 or something, but by mistake I went to 1025. And in room 1025, I tried to open that door. There will be some cut, some sound, but the door will not open. The rail light will show. Suddenly, I heard footsteps coming from inside, and I was shocked. Supposed to be my room, empty room. The door was open, and this fellow came in and said, "Yes." I told him, "Excuse me, I thought this was my friend's room," because Samir Kochar had told me that his room number was 1225. Actually, I made a mistake and went to 1025. And then he said, "No, I'm not him." I apologized, came to 1023, opened my room, cleaned up, went up, and we enjoyed our aloo paratha. We enjoyed our discussion for the next day's conference, etc. It was very late, about midnight. I came back to my room. But instead of going into 1023, I again by mistake went to 1025. Remember the same room where the person, when I said I'm looking for Samir Kochar, he had said, "I'm not him." And again, the same stupid thing happened. The door won't open, and I thought, my God, I have to go down to the lobby to get a new key. Again, I heard footsteps and I got shocked. This time I realized what was going to happen. So I was about to say sorry when the door opened. The same tall, dark man in his lungi, very angry. But you know what he told me? "I am still not him." Can you see his sense of humor even at 12 o'clock midnight being disturbed by an idiot? And he remembered that this fellow was asking for Samir Kochar, and I told him I'm not him, and he still comes here. I sort of apologized, went to my room, slept. Next day morning, early morning, we were having breakfast with Samir Kochar and his tea, and I told Samir this is what had happened. So he laughed and said, "You're a goofy professor as usual, but doesn't matter." And then he suddenly disappeared. I didn't realize where he had gone. Some 7 minutes later, he comes back, all smiles, and said, "Sir, guess what? I went to room 1025. I said, "What?" I said, "Yes." He said, "I knocked on the room. And when he opened the door, I smiled and said, "I am him." And that guy smiled. He even remembered my name. "Oh, you are Mr. Samir Kochar," he said. "Nice meeting you." point I'm trying to make, my dear friend, is if we put ourselves into shoes of that person, I would have every right to be completely irritated with life. In a hotel where I'm sleeping comfortably, this idiot comes in at night 10:30, then comes in again at 12 o'clock. And next day morning, another person shows up. But you know, Samir said that fellow smiled, he shook hands, talked to me for 2 minutes, and then sort of I came back. There will be circumstances like this that will be happening whenever we are participating in any activity. Occasions will be there when we will feel frustrated, when we will feel irritated, when somebody's behavior will be completely non-acceptable. It is in such trying times, it is very, very important to retain our sense of balance, to retain our composure, and to retain our sense of humor. I believe this was an important learning for me, which I have ever since been practicing. The fourth story I wish to relate to is about personal ethics. I have learned personal ethics from a large number of people by observing how they behave. But this one particular incident is etched in my mind. This happened in 1971 or 72, I don't remember when. A friend of mine was to get married in the city of Nagpur, and I wanted to attend that marriage. So there was another friend of mine, Mr. Kulkarni, with whom I was going to stay for 2 days, attend this friend's marriage and come back. I took the overnight train which reaches Nagpur, those days early morning, about 5:30 or something. I got out, there were cycle rickshaws standing in a row outside. And I asked one fellow, showing him the address, I said, I want to go there. We negotiated, he said, sir, it will cost you 1 rupee. I said, fine. It was about 15, 20, 25 minutes away. He took me there and I could see the house where my friend lived. He had given me the address. I got down from the rickshaw, took my bag, and while I was trying to pay him, I had only a 10 rupee note. So I gave him a 10 rupee note. The rickshawala smiled and said, "Sab savere savere mere paas chutte paise kahan se aayenge? Where will I get change early morning?" So I said, "I'm sorry, man, but I don't have any change. I have only a 10 rupee note." So he says, "You have come here to stay, so why don't you go and ask your relatives to pay me 1 rupee?" I said, "It will be very embarrassing. First of all, they're not my relatives, they're friends, and I'm meeting them for the first time. And early morning, 6:30, 6 o'clock, to go there and ask them for 1 rupee will be very embarrassing." Then he says, "All right, if you are staying here, give me some time. Whenever I get change, I will come back and give you." I said, fine. And he went. I went to the friend's home. I was introduced to family members. I took bath. We had breakfast and so on. An hour passed, then 2 hours passed. After a couple of hours, I was getting worried because 9 rupees was a reasonably large sum. You may not be aware, but my monthly salary those days was 450 rupees. So 9 rupees was important for me. And I was wondering why he has not come. So when I asked whether somebody has come to see me or something like that, I think I asked twice. My friend's younger brother, Prafulla, said, "Deepak, why are you asking this?" I said, then I sheepishly told him that I had given a 10 rupee note to this rickshawala, and he had a hearty laugh. He said, "You are an idiot." He said, "Why on earth would that rickshawala ever come back again? Have you taken down his rickshaw number or something? Have you asked his name?" I said, "No, nothing. I just believed in him." He says, "He knows that you have come for a marriage. He knows that you have come from Bombay. He knows that within 2 days you will go back. Why on earth would he have an intention to come back all the way to give you 9 rupees? You stupid fellow, you lost your money." And I felt crestfallen. But anyway, nothing happened for another 2 hours. 4.5 hours later, there was a knock on the door. And I was sitting in the hall. So when somebody opened the door, I was very pleasantly surprised to see this rickshawala. And he asked for the guest who has come in the morning. He saw me and they said, "Sir, ye aapka 9 rupiya. This is 9 rupees. And I said, "Thank you very much," smiling. Then he said, "Sir, I'm very sorry for the delay. When I left you, I had a bhada, a fare, where a man wanted his wife who was to be taken to a hospital which was 7 kilometers away. She was a patient. And I could not refuse that, so I took her there. But after that, I could not get any fare to come to this side. And I was moving around doing other chores. So that is why it took time. Only when I got spare time, I came here. I'm really sorry for this delay. Here are your 9 rupees. Please understand the scenario, my dear friends. He's not a very rich person. In fact, he was an extremely poor person who was leading a very hard life. He was earning money by taking people in his cycle rickshaw from early morning. 9 rupees meant a lot of money for him. But he did not think even 1 second about pocketing that money. He deserved to get paid 1 rupee. He got paid 1 rupee. After 4 hours, after collecting change, he rode all the way back to return money. What is the principle that he had in mind? I may be poor or rich, but whatever is not mine is not mine. And if I know it is somebody else's and who that somebody is, it is my responsibility to return that money. I mean, again, I would humbly submit that many of us who have well-to-do lives, who are better educated, sometimes forget to follow such very simple and important ethical practices in our life. My humble request is try and remember this. Every time you do anything, please ensure that it is done as ethically, at least as ethically as the simple rickshaw driver from Nagpur did some 50 years ago. The fifth story I wish to share with you relates to the aspiration of our youth, and I'm sure all the young students who are attending this session will relate to this. This happened about 20 years ago. I had set up the Kanwal Rekhi School of IT in IIT Bombay, and there is an agency called Marathi Vigyan Parishad. Many of you might have heard of it. It attempts to disseminate the science knowledge and excite people with science across the community. So the Thana district division of the Marathi Vigyan Parishad Maharashtra holds an annual conference. That year they were going to hold an event in a city called Wada. Wada is about 60 kilometers from Mumbai. And they requested me whether I could speak to the students of 9th, 10th, 11th grade on information technology in Marathi. I usually give talks in English. I can speak Hindi because I have studied in Hindi in Madhya Pradesh. Although Marathi is my mother tongue, I rarely get an occasion to speak in Marathi. But I said fine because relating to school children. And the organizers told me that most of the children attending the event will actually come from tribal schools because that area is almost a tribal area. I said absolutely no issue. I prepared for the talk, went there. It was sort of a quadrangular building. In one hall we had this lecture. About 300 students. I tell you, I could easily see that they come from very humble backgrounds, but they had spark in their eyes. The lecture went well. Very intelligent questions were asked by some students. And at the end of the lecture, I was very satisfied. When we came down from the first floor hall, in the quadrilateral, we sort of assembled. And suddenly these boys and girls took out copies, notebooks, and they wanted my autograph. I was quite surprised because only I thought celebrities give autographs. I was only a teacher. But that day I can confess that I felt like I was a cine star or something. So I sat at one place and started signing autographs. There was one boy standing next to me. Just standing. I asked him, don't you want my signature? He says, no. Mala tumhala kai prashna vicharache. I wanted to ask you some questions. I said, fine, just hold on. I will sign some more signatures and answer. As I was signing, one of the organizers came and said, sir, the chief guest is waiting for a cup of tea for you. Chief guest was an important political leader, I think MP or MLA from that region. And he said he has to go early. And you had also mentioned you have to go back to IIT early. I said yes. And then sort of concluded my signing and got up and started moving. And suddenly this boy caught my hand. He actually caught my hand like this and said, sir, you had promised to answer me my questions. I apologized to him. I said, look, the important chief guest is waiting. Then he said, sir, I have walked 10 kilometers to listen to you. So I was quite shocked. You walked 10 kilometers. He says, what is there? I walk 6 kilometers to my school every day. So I said, why do you walk 6 kilometers? Don't you have a rickshaw or bus or something? And in simple Marathi with simple smile, he said, I sir, but parvadat nahi. So we have those facilities, but we can't afford. So I walk. And then he proudly said, sir, I stand first in my class. And yesterday, my Guruji told me that some professor from IIT is going to speak about information technology. Therefore, I walked 10 kilometers to attend your place. I was so fascinated. I told the organizers to request the chief guest to have tea by themselves. And I asked him, okay, you ask me what are questions. So he had only one question. He says, Marathi, Mala Mahiti Tantradnyanatla Tajne Bhaisa. I want to become an expert in IT. What should I study? Now, I gathered that coming from very humble background, economic background, he must be enamored by the salaries that are paid to IT professionals that he must be reading, and he must want a good job, and therefore he wanted to become an expert in IT. So I asked him what standard he was in 9th grade. I told him pass 9, 10, 11, 12, study maths and science, study very carefully, Then I told him about the competitive joint entrance exam. I told him about the engineering courses. I told him that he can do either electronics or computer science or information technology or whatever, and he can become an engineer, and that is how he will become an expert. He appeared satisfied. I was still wondering that this must be his motivation of getting a good job, but to confirm, I asked him one question. Why do you want to become an expert in IT? And I tell you, his answer floored me. His eyes sparkled and said, sir, you had a student called Nandan Nilekani. He has set up a company called Infosys. I read about it. I want to set up a company like Infosys. Can you imagine this 9th standard boy from a tribal community going to a school, walking 6 kilometers every day, does not have just aspirations to do well in life for himself, but he wants to set up a company. He wants to do something much bigger. I'm sure that all the students in this country have such aspirations. All of those who are participating in this science fest are actually people who have demonstrated to themselves and to the world that they want to do something special, something peculiar. I'm sure all of you have such great aspirations. And I'm telling you, it is so very, very important to have those aspirations, to nurture those aspirations, but it is equally important to work hard to realize them. It is not that we always succeed in realizing all the big dreams that we have, but not dreaming big is a crime. And I'm so happy that the youth of this country is not participating in that crime. They have aspirations. My humble suggestion to you all is have bigger aspirations, and don't forget such tribal kids. Everybody, in fact, every student in the country who is trying very hard. So when you try hard to do well in life, when you try hard to do great things in your own chosen field of science or technology or commerce or whatever it is, please have your aspirations one level up. Try to do something bigger than that. Try to look at the larger society which you can serve by making your aspirations larger and by working hard to achieving them. I will never forget this tribal boy. In fact, the Eklavya project which I started and incorporating technology to large-scale education like T10 KT program, even part of my Akash tablet work later, it all came because of that incentive, that there are boys and girls like this, not just in Wada, not just in Thane district, not just in Maharashtra, in the entire country, in fact, entire world. And our country has the largest population, crores of young students with these kind of aspirations. I think it is the responsibility of us as a society that we should do something special for them. I'm so happy that Birla College has been doing it. This Science Fest organization is just one of the facets through which the college is serving the need to satisfy the aspirations of the youth of this country. But I digress. The last story I want to relate to you is not just a story. It started with a story, but there is a series of activities that have happened since then, which I believe are important because they indicate to us the nature of things and activities that we will have to undertake in this 21st century, in this digital century. You know, this happened, I think, late 70s or early 80s, late 70s. You know, before I became an expert in databases and information systems, I actually used to work in digital signal and image processing. And we were working on characterizing digital signals and figuring out the main attributes and characteristics of the entities from which the signals emanated. So we decided to look at the electrocardiogram, ECG strip charts we used to get. And we wondered whether by doing an exponential fit, an algorithm which was being attempted in a great American university, then the research was going on. So me and my student Sunil Sherlekar were working on it. The way we had to work with those signals was, he would go to the hospital, collect the strip charts, then hand digitize those ECG waves, hand digitize by calculating the point. Then he had to punch cards with those values and then feed those values into the program that we had written. Please remember, those days, DFT was, digital Fourier transform was just invented, and fast Fourier transform was actually being constructed. They were very early days. And we did our analysis. We actually got very interesting results. We could connect through the help of the doctors advising the patients and so on. We could connect some of the parameters that we had found to some elements of the heart, etc. But by looking at the method that we adopted, most of my colleagues say, Phatak, this algorithm, etc. is very nice, but the patient would be long dead before you diagnose him because the procedure that you're following, you're collecting the ECG and hand digitizing, then punching cards. So he says, this is not going to work. I felt very frustrated. Actually, my student got the best paper award on the work that he had done. But having seen the frustration, that was one of the reasons why I gave up and converted to databases. My guru, late Professor Kekre, never liked my doing that. Please appreciate that the technology has advanced so much that today an ordinary camera can easily do convolution operations on the fly, can easily do equalization and create beautiful JPEG images on the fly. So you have the computing power inside a camera, digital camera. You have the best of the algorithms implemented such that what used to take hours and days actually happens in fractions of seconds. So this is how the technology has progressed, and it permits us to do a variety of things which was not possible to be done then. But this is what brings in the need for multidisciplinary approach in solving all the problems. All of you would be familiar with a device called pulse oximeter. I don't know whether you can see that. It works on a simple principle. It has two LEDs here. I put my finger here, and the light which is emitted by those, it is diffused differently, and I can actually get a reading of the SpO2 or to the extent that oxygen levels are there in my blood cells. Please understand that this simple device requires multiple disciplines to be used. First of all, you require basic science. You need to use the fact that the blood vessels in your fingertip or in your earlobe would actually diffuse red and infrared light differently. There are actually two LEDs emitting light signals or pulses at two different frequencies, different nanometers. And the diffused light is actually collected by a photodiode upstairs. Earlier, by the way, there is no image analysis to be done here, but you still need the diffusion parameters. 30 times a second, you switch those things. So you require heavy computing. All of that is done by a small microprocessor with appropriate algorithms inside this. Then you require a small display. You require some engineering to create such a device. And you require, of course, the financial wizardry to create a company to manufacture and sell these devices. You require so many things in order to get this simple gadget accessible to ordinary people at affordable cost. To my friends studying science and participating in this event and even otherwise, I would like to humbly suggest that while understanding scientific principles is absolutely important, because that forms the basis of everything that we do in solving problems in this digital world. But that alone is not adequate. You need to understand the important elements of other disciplines as well. You need to understand something from engineering, something from technology, something from finance. And last but not the least, something from humanity. Why do I bring in humanity here? So let me share with you some of the thoughts that I had, and I think I have seen other people sharing it. You see, science and technology will help you to come up with solutions which are feasible. That means there is a problem and you have a solution which is feasible to implement, which will solve that problem. This might require multiple disciplines, etc. But feasibility alone, is it adequate? No. You require that solution to become economically viable when you make products or services and sell them. So you require financial wizards, you require managers, you require economics understanding. You require all of that to understand that which of these feasible solutions you have economically viable solutions. The first point is feasibility, which people like us are able to establish. Out of 10 feasible solutions, there might be only 3 which are economically viable. To figure that out, we require help from our financial experts, managers, and others. But out of these 3, which solutions would you actually select? Should you not select one which is most useful to the community to which you are bringing that solution? Consider, for example, you have multiple solutions, 2 of which actually are both viable and economically feasible, but one which has a chance of generating additional employment and the other which curtails employment. Which one will you select for a country like ours? Now that answer will not come from science. That answer will not come from management or finance. That answer will come from humanity. And it is the human sensitivity which will permit us to determine what is good for human beings. And that is why you require this Trimarya, this Trimurti of application of mind, science and technology for building feasible solutions, economics, finance, and management for deciding which solutions are economically viable, and the last, the human sensitivity and human touch to decide what solutions are desirable. It is when you apply all of these together, then you can actually make fantastic contributions to humanity, not only solve their problems, making them affordable, but you will solve their problems in the most desirable way. I'm sorry, friends, I have already overtaken my time. I had actually told my friends that I have some other engagement. Fortunately, I've been able to push that engagement, and that is why I added this sixth story. I do not know how useful you find these stories, but I would still like to do a quick relisting of these so that some of you will remember and perhaps try to reflect. My first story related to the need to bring out the best in you, in spite of continuing to participate in the rat races, which we have to do. I mean, we have to score good marks, we have to stand first, we have to make more money, all of that is granted. And still, I believe what is most important is to remember to bring out the best in ourselves. And therefore, the need for introspection after doing any activity and figuring out where we could have done better. And believe me, once again, the answer to this question is always yes. You'll always find you could have done better. That is where our learning happens. The second story was about the fiduciary discipline that we need to maintain when dealing with public money. What I learned from my simple and humble friend Abdul Jabbar 50 years ago, and I have cherished that. I would humbly request you, all of you, to remember this, that when you are dealing with public money, when you are dealing with somebody else's money, not only you should be as diligent in spending it as you are when you are spending your own money, but perhaps more. Follow all the rules, follow all the regulations, be very, very strict, because you are responsible, you are accountable to someone else for spending that. The third story related to my experience of a great individual who could retain his composure and sense of humor in spite of being troubled by an idiot in the midnight in a hotel. My fourth story was about personal ethics, and believe me, I have seen, by the way, a large number of people who follow that personal ethics very, very careful. But this rickshawala's act of coming all the way to return my 9 rupees early morning, I will never forget. If an ordinary rickshawala can maintain that kind of ethics and that kind of discipline, I think it is important that all of us who are far more privileged should definitely endeavor to maintain a much higher level of ethics in our life. The fifth story related to the aspirations of the youth, where I had this chance meeting with this great boy in that Wada school who wanted to build something large, a company, not becoming an IT expert just to get a good job, but had some larger dream. And I relate to it because I have traveled across the country, I have seen talent exist in every nook and corner, and I have seen aspiration. In fact, your participation in this science fest is nothing but your aspiration to do something special, to something very particular on which you have applied your mind. So please keep these aspirations alive, and please keep these aspirations as big as you can, because when you attempt to achieve them, you will do certainly far better than what you would otherwise. My last story, my dear friends, related to the need for multidisciplinary activities and multidisciplinary understanding to solve any problem in this digital century. So while you become experts in science and maths, that is very fine, but you must also learn something about other domains, and never ever forget the importance of all three things. Science and technology, number one, to give you the feasible solutions to problems. Finance and management and commerce, number two, to understand which of those solutions are viable. And last but not the least, the understanding of humanity around us, to realize which of these solutions are desirable and which we must implement. I'm sorry for taking a bit longer than my allotted time. I hope you enjoyed the stories, but I would still like to spend 2 minutes because I also see that a lot of teachers have assembled here. My humble request to teachers is as follows. Imagine I'm a student in your class. Now, you might have 60, 70, 80 students. I don't know. In IIT, we have 120, 200 students. In the schools, there are 30 students. For you, sir or madam, I am just part of a larger statistics of 60 students. But don't ever forget that for me, you are the only teacher in that subject. For me, I look forward to you to guide me, to handhold me, to encourage me, to talk to me at least once, so that I take some enthusiasm in whatever I am trying to study. You may not appreciate it, sir or madam, but as a student, I always look up to you as my role model. If you just take my name once and ask me one question, I'll feel elated. Please remember me as a student, not as a part of statistics. Thank you so much, friends. Thank you for giving.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the wonderful talk. The numerous way that you have explained the very important physics lessons in life, I think that will stay with us for a very long time. Thank you very much, sir. I would like to request Vice Principal Dr. Mahendra